Hey guys, welcome back. Now that we have learned the basics of 3D modeling in Fusion, we can actually start modeling for 3D printing. In this lesson, I will give you an introduction to modeling for 3D printing. There are some things that are important to keep in mind when creating 3D models that you actually intend to print. These are material strength, maximum size, tolerance, angles and support, and time/material costs. Starting with material strength, you don't want to make walls or limbs too thin. For walls, I typically use a minimal thickness of 3 mm, which is not very limiting in most design, but it does provide enough strength and sturdiness for most applications. Limb thickness really depends on the application. This arm you see here is going to be pretty weak, but this equally thin joint will do just fine. The next thing to keep in mind is the size of the 3D printer. You can't print a 1 meter part in a 30 by 30 centimeter 3D printer, for example, so be sure to check this before you start modeling. Further, we have the tolerance of the 3D printer. Depending on your 3D printer, the 3D print will be more or less precise. To compensate for this imprecision, you can add a tolerance to any part that interacts with other parts, like a hinge, or any part that is dependent on exact measures. For my 3D printer, I often use a tolerance of about 0.4 mm, but you can check what tolerance works well for yours on the internet. Next up, we have angles and support. The way 3D printing works is it prints layer by layer and works up vertically. Doing so, it is not able to do sharp angles in the vertical direction. A 45-degree angle, as you see here, will mostly turn out quite well, but going a lot steeper will turn out bad or can actually completely mess up the print. If your design does require angles steeper than 45 degrees, you can choose to add support structure when setting up your print. This will print a thin structure below the overhanging part for support, which you can break off when the print is done, but it does take up extra time and filament. This brings us to the final point, which is time and material cost. You should always try to make your model as efficient as you can, not making parts bigger than they really need to be, for example, so that your time and materials aren't wasted. So these are some of the important things to keep in mind when modeling for 3D printing. One step in the process, which I will not go into, is slicing. This is where you turn your 3D model created in Fusion or another 3D modeling software to a file your 3D printer can read and print. This is where you alter variables like the wall line count and whether or not you want to add support structure. But because this depends a lot on your specific 3D printer and because you will be easily able to find a tutorial completely tailored to your setup, I will not spend any time on slicing in this course. So that is it for this introduction to 3D printing. I hope it was clear and I will see you in the next lesson.